What's up, everybody? Welcome back into ESPN's F1 betting show. That is the ever dapper Joe Fortenbaugh. I am the bum Dalen Cuff with the F1 logo there. Still back-to-back shows showcasing the branding on the beautiful set there out in Vegas. Joe, before we get to what's going to happen in the Spanish Grand Prix, let's start with Monaco. An all-time qualifying session. What looked like a standard parade in Monaco. It gets wet. Got a little wild. How did you feel about last week's race?
So, and we talked about this, when you're betting Monaco, the street circuit, narrow, very difficult to overtake. You go back 2 years ago, there was one overtake the entire race. It was Schumacher over Mazepin, right? So it was all set up. This is like 5 minutes before we get to the rain. Every matchup I had was exactly where it needed to be. Leclerc was a couple spots behind Carlos Sainz. I had that bet. Everything was lined up, and we're going to finish the race, and that's going to be that. No one's going to overtake. Then it starts raining. Sainz immediately skids off the track. Leclerc goes right past him. I never have a chance to recover that bet. All in all, it was a decent day, but it's one thing after another with Ferrari, right? It's one thing after another, dude.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to that in a second because that's carrying forward to this week for me on my Ferrari situation. Qualifying, we said it last week. I took Leclerc before we got through the even practice. He was getting good odds at plus 150. He actually went to plus 200 by qualifying time. So I lost a little value there. I also did Alonso for the race and Alonso qualifying. I was trying to go against the grain, as we said. I tried to overthink things, but at qualifying, I thought I was money. First, you have Leclerc make a great run. He gets provisional pole. Then Alonso comes in. Max is 2/10 off. I think we're good. And then that dude just shows why he is just ice cold killer. Takes the pole. From that point of time, you knew it was kind of a wrap. When it did get wet, though, man, and this has been much discussed about Alonso's decision to not go right to inters, to go to medium tires, and then have to go to inters the next lap. I thought there could be a shot here because Max's tires were worn in the medium. He was still out in the water. If he goes inters, what could happen? They didn't handle that as well because I did have him win in the race. It didn't work out. Went contrarian. Didn't go my way. The one thing did go was I thought if Max could run away with it was the over 10 seconds win. He won by, 30 seconds or something like that. So
no problem.
We'll come back to that again here later in the show as well. Okay, so as we turn our attention to the Spanish Grand Prix, what are you kind of big picture? What are you focusing on in terms of some of the teams or some of the upgrades? Obviously, Mercedes brought upgrades last week. Tough to tell how much that means. And just where you're at here as we come into this race week.
Okay, very excited for this week because I get to deploy a strategy that I wanted to deploy at Imola a couple weeks ago, but the race ends up getting canceled. And that's going to be a big fade on McLaren, right? So McLaren has the big update package that they had been telling us about forever going into Baku. The problem with Baku is that it's a street circuit. There's not a ton of overtaking there, so you only get to see so much. Imola's a fast track, wide open circuit, lots of overtaking, lots of straightaways. We were going to get to see something there. And the McLaren has had problems with straight line speed all year. It has been a major issue how much time they give up in the straights. So at Imola, my thought is we're going to be able to fade these guys, and then the race gets canceled. So you go to Monte Carlo, they finish 9th and 10th, Norris and Piastri, and now they're going to be a little bit overvalued coming into this weekend. I think once you see the practice sessions and qualifying, the prices are going to readjust. But for right now, my thought process is any way I can fade McLaren, that's what I'm looking to do. Because when you get to a place like this where you can open up the speed, that is where this car is going to be a big disadvantage. That's talking point number one for me.
I like where you're at there, and I'm going to stay with the negative too, just in terms of Ferrari. Again, you have one of the basic things in this sport, especially in the qualifying, is communicating with your driver. In a qualifying session on a street track like Monaco, he's got to know who's on flying laps behind him. He has no clue. Lando's behind him. He gets caught in the tunnel. He blocks him, impedes him, gets a three-spot grid penalty, which in Monaco it's a death sentence. You're done. Like if he was supposed to be P3, he's probably getting that podium. Sorry, Esteban Ocon. You're not overtaking him, and if they don't brick the strategy, which with Sainz were some problems there too, in the race. This is my issue. I think Sainz he seems to be pressing at times. We saw him make some kind of crazy decisions last week. He got a little frustrated too about some of their strategy decisions. I'm just fading Ferrari. I'm going to look at a lot of these head-to-heads. I think we'll come to Mercedes. I think Mercedes, if they've been Mercedes-Ferrari head-to-heads, I'm going to lean Mercedes on this. I feel like I'm a little more of a believer in this potential upgrade package when we did see the underside of Lewis Hamilton's car up there. So if the technical people could really decipher some stuff, maybe they pulled some things from that. I couldn't. But anyway, I believe that they have performed well. They've got two very good drivers. I think they've always had the great they always are right on the pit wall. I'm going to lean them, especially with some of these head-to-heads. So I like Mercedes. I like their potential. I'm not going to do this until we see practice, though. How do you feel about Merck's updates and what we may see from them?
All right, the point on Ferrari, and you and I have like taken turns trying to support them and losing money as a result. What you cover college basketball, I cover a lot of sports. You and I do this, but we cover a lot of other stuff and we work together on Daily Wager. You sometimes see this with cultures and teams. They just can't figure it out. They just don't have good leadership and they make big mistakes in big spots. I mean, you're talking about the grid penalty. How about the fact that Sainz thought he was pitting like for 10 minutes. Every time he came around, it was just stay out, stay out. They had such poor communication. That's not new. I doubt they're cleaning that up in 1 week. To Mercedes's point, I find myself very tentative. I think the practice sessions, the times we see there are going to be very important. But I also find myself saying this. Can it be worse than what we've seen? Because they have been very upset with the car concept for a while. They realized in testing at the beginning of the season, they finally were ready to admit they had gone in the wrong direction with the car and they needed big changes. So here come the big changes. Is it possible that it's going to be worse? Because based on what we've seen from them this year, they've been relatively competent. If you don't compare them to Red Bull, they've been solid. They've had a very solid season. So by that logic, if these upgrades are actually upgrades and the car's moving at least a little bit in the right direction, the thought would be maybe they're a buy-on candidate this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers say that right now. They're minus 150 at a double top six finish, and that's not that surprising. Now, you can get Hamilton or Russell. Hamilton's about plus 200 a lot of books. Russell's around plus 250 or so to get on a podium. Fernando Alonso has locked in that third place. He's like minus 200 right now. Sergio's minus 330, I think, and Max is like minus 400 or something like that to get on a podium, because likely those two dudes are doing it. We'll come back to that in a second with Red Bull and a double podium opportunity. So, yes, I think I'm going to probably lay some money on Mercedes. I'm obviously going with a bias right now, but if practice tells me otherwise, and if the quality tells me otherwise, I will not, but we're going to wait and see. But I feel a little better about them. All right, some of the bets you're looking at right now. I know you're interested in some practice plays. We haven't done a lot of practice plays. What do we got?
We haven't done any. So I started going through all the practice sessions just to see how the team drivers stacked up against each other, because normally you can only bet in FP1 a teammates against one another. One thing I noticed right out of the gate, let's go to Alpine, who looked very good last weekend. Ocon's coming off the podium. He's sitting there minus 125 against Pierre Gasly. All right. So minus 125 versus Gasly, who's minus 105. FP1s this year, there's been 6 of them. 3 times Gasly's been better. 3 times Ocon's been better. They're in comparable cars. They're comparable drivers. This should be closer to even money. But I see value because Gasly finished behind Ocon last week. So I'm going to play Pierre Gasly, better FP1, minus 105. Another situation, Hülkenberg versus Magnussen over at Haas, right? Again, 6 practice sessions. Hülkenberg in FP1 has beaten him 4 separate times. He's been much more consistent throughout the course of the season. He is minus 125-ish, so they've got him as a favorite, but I think he should be a bigger favorite. So those are the 2 I'm going to play. You have wild prices elsewhere. You got Max like minus 450 against Checo. Max has won 5 of the 6 FP1s against Checo. A lot of them are just very skewed. These are close ones where I see value. So I'm taking Hülkenberg over Magnussen. I'm going to take Gasly over Ocon.
Interesting. I like your logic, like your rationale. I'm going to lay up on the practice plays, but I like where you're at right now.
Shame on you. Get involved.
I may tail you. I'm not just going to go off here and just go nuts for no reason here. What else do you got in terms of winning team, or you got any qualification plays as we kind of work our way through the weekend here?
So I was just looking at that. I don't have anything with quali or anything like that. I will throw out there the idea of there's a prop bet where you can eliminate Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Aston Martin. Basically the 4 best. You can get them out of there, and then you can bet the driver that's going to win or the team that's going to win. Alpine their mistakes have been self-inflicted at a lot of terms, but they got a really good car. We saw it last week. We've seen it on different circuits. Minus 165 that either Ocon or Gasly finishes the highest out of everyone, not from the top 4 teams. That's a bet I'm making because, like we said, I don't think McLaren's going to perform well here at all. Williams has their issues. Haas has their issues. They actually really a lot of questions about how they performed last week. Hülkenberg saying he thinks it's track related. They're going to be better. But when you stack up Alpine versus the rest of the field, I see a clear difference. So I'll go ahead and I'll take the 2 drivers together minus 165 to finish best.
I know it's a lot of juice, but whenever we send these emails out to see where people are at, where we're both at, I was right there with you. I like that play. I liked it last week. Didn't have the stones to play it. I was a little concerned about. And here's the wild card. He is underperforming, definitely relative to his teammate. is Lance Stroll. He has a better car.
Big time.
He is the one guy that could ruin this whole bet, because when we separate these teams, as we've just said, the 4 teams, or I should say the 7 drivers, are on one side. Everybody else is here. It's Alpine, and then whatever Stroll is going to do. And he was bad last week, to say the least. And I obviously pressure building with him. His teammate looks great. The car is excellent for him. He's got to perform, and I wonder what he's going to do. So I still like your play. I'm not in on Stroll's performance, so I like Alpine. I'm going to lay a lot of juice on that as well as we get to race day here. What else are you looking at?
The Red Bull double podium. I mean, look, they're winning every race. They're crushing everybody. To go into these races, you either have to take them out of the equation from your gambling perspective, like you've got to do what we're talking about where you're playing Alpine without the top 4 teams involved, or you got to get on them. And I look at a track like this, and when you have the street circuits, it can go a certain way. This isn't a street circuit. This is where this car is at its absolute best. It gets out in front and it blows you away, or, and we've seen this earlier this year with Max and Checo, you start further down the field and you work your way all the way up when you get to those DRS zones. So the way I see it, I'm going to play both of them on the podium. The pricing is minus 165 for a double podium. That implies I believe it's a 62% probability. So what we got to ask ourselves is there a 38% chance that one of these 2 drivers is not on the podium? Well, we're basically betting either car failure or we're betting an accident.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, that's what we're betting. 38% chance. I like my odds with that one. I'm going to play him for the double podium, because if they're 1-2 in quali, or even if they're not 1-2, 1-3, 2-3, whatever it is, they're going to get out in front and they're going to leave everyone behind them, like we saw in the first 2 races of the year.
We also did learn this in the college basketball season. When me and you are both on the same things, it's usually not a good thing. But here we go again. Let's double down, baby. Because it's the same thing you just said. This track, it's long straightaways where that DRS is a whole different level. They've got fast corners. I think this is a track more built for their car, and their car is just superior. We absolutely know that. So I'm not even scared of qualifying, and I do think when they go through qualifying clean, you're not getting minus 165 here. It's going to be minus 200 if those both are in the top 3 or even the top 4. We've seen Ferrari be able to compete. We've seen Aston Martin with Alonso be able to compete in a 1-lap pace. On the race pace, it's just not going to happen. And that's why my favorite play, because it's still plus money right now, is the over 10 seconds gap to win again. I think it's probably going to be Max, but if it's not, maybe it will be Checo. I don't know, but I think either way, the Red Bulls are going to be running their own race out in front and rolling. And if you're over 10 seconds right now, I believe that's plus 105. And I feel like this is going to be a race where they're going to kind of command things. And then it's everybody else. I'm very interested in a lot of the matchups, as we just said. That's going to be really interesting in keeping my engagement throughout the course of the race. But going in pre-race, I don't have a ton of plays that I like other than the 2 that we just agreed upon, which concerns me, and then the over on the time.
There's one that I've been looking at. I haven't done a lot of this yet, but we've talked about head-to-head matchups. You can do group betting as well, where they'll give you like 4 drivers, and they'll give you odds on those 4 drivers, and it's basically your own mini race. Which of these 4 drivers is going to finish at the top? I had success with that at Monaco because, again, there's not a lot of overtaking, so you're just basically stacking the grid and making your play from there. But I'm going to start getting involved in more of those as well, because I think you might get both McLaren drivers together, assuming they're near each other on the grid. And if you can find the cars, especially if they continue to group them with Alpine, there's going to be an advantage playing that as well. So group betting, you get 4 guys. It's like a mini race there. Keep an eye on that stuff, because, again, it's, for me, the big opportunities are going to be the anti-McLaren opportunities as soon as they hit the board.
And as I mentioned, I'm in the anti-Ferrari opportunities. I think it's what you just said, though, is fascinating how the narrative still drives some of this stuff, because even Lando was asked about, relative to Alpine this coming week. And he just said, like, no, like it was just like his response was just like, we're not even worried about Alpine, but that's been the team that they were supposed to be competing with in the top of the midfield area. And I think that still is being woven together by media. And it seems like that in terms of the book, still putting those groups together when those cars are not in the same place.
Because we've had so many street circuits. That's the beauty of this right now. So many street circuits early where cars that are inferior have had an opportunity to stay close. Again, McLaren going 9-10 last week was fantastic for us, because that's not going to happen outside of a bunch of wrecks or something like that on a circuit like this. This is where we can take advantage of some mispricing based on what we've seen. And by the way, while we're on the subject, how about Verstappen and everyone at Red Bull saying, well, our advantage is kind of mitigated here at Monaco. We can't really take advantage of it. And he still just gets out in front and kicks everybody's ass. in the rain, not running on slicks. It's just, as you watch this, that team in that car is so dominant right now. The drivers are so dominant right now. We got to stop outthinking the room with galaxy brain as if someone's going to outmaneuver them. They need to wreck, or the car needs to fail in order for us to lose, in order for them to lose. That's the only way it's happening.
Checo just proved that, because he was terrible, but Max was excellent. And not with that, Max went 50 laps on those medium tires. Like, that was, and then in the end, in the rain too. I mean, it was a stellar performance, without a doubt. Stellar performance by you two, as always, Joe. More F1 coverage coming your way after the race on Sunday. We'll have your show on the different social media platforms. Also, listen on Laugh with Katie, George, and crew on your podcasts. Joe, see you this weekend.
Amen.